Welcome. This is the Enlightenment Show, and I'm your host, Lauri Schoenfeld. This is where Chicken Soup for the Soul meets the artist way with Nancy Drew. Our guest today is Jessica Vitalis, author of Coyote Queen. We're going to be chatting with her today all about her new release and a time when she felt the most resilient. Hello, Jessica. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Lauri. I'm really excited to be here talking about Coyote Queen.
Absolutely. I'm so excited and honored to also be talking about it. It releases tomorrow. Yay, Coyote Queen. Can you share with our listeners and viewers what Coyote Queen is all about?
Sure. Coyote Queen is the story of a 12-year-old girl named Fudd. And Fudd is actually desperate to escape an abusive situation. She lives in a trailer in rural Wyoming with her mother and her mother's boyfriend. And the boyfriend, whose name is Larry, brings home a rusted out boat that he plans to fix up and turn into their permanent home. And Fudd is certain that this is going to be nothing more than a floating prison. So she ends up entering a beauty pageant, hoping to win the prize money that she and her mother need to escape the situation. But there is a nearby pack of coyotes that starts to cause strange changes to Fudd's body, and she goes colorblind and she starts to notice she can smell things a lot better. And then pretty soon she realizes she has to figure out how to win the pageant with a tail.
I loved how you did that, by the way.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
You have multiple pieces of yourself woven throughout the story. Why was that important for you to tell it?
This story is one that I have been trying to tell pretty much my whole adult life. So I had a very unusual childhood in that I moved nearly 24 times before I even reached fourth grade. And I lived in a camper, and I lived in a campground, and I lived in a one-room cabin with no electricity and no running water. And during those years, I was often cold, and I was often very hungry because my family was poor. And I was also scared a lot because one of the adults in my life didn't treat me in the way that adults should treat children. And one of the things that I learned as a kid is that it was safer to be invisible. But I had this really deep-seated longing to be seen and to be heard. To be honest, I wasn't all that good at being invisible as a kid. And that certainly carried through into adulthood. And so that's why I decided to try to write a memoir telling my story. But memoirs are uniquely difficult to write because life doesn't really follow a neat narrative arc. And at the time that I started writing, I also had no idea how to write a book. And so, to be honest, the first story that I wrote, the memoir, was not very compelling. And I ended up setting it aside and writing fiction for several years. But there was still this little girl Jessica inside of me longing to be seen and longing to be heard. And this idea of telling a story of a kid in a difficult situation just really kept calling out to me. And I finally realized that it really wasn't telling my story that it was so important. It was sort of telling a universal story that would resonate with kids in really difficult situations, kids who grew up like I did, who were maybe feeling hopeless and definitely feeling invisible, and just really wanting to share with them that there is hope and help available.
Mm-hmm. How was your main character, Fudd, and you similar as a kid and also not alike?
That is an interesting question. I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit that I was actually quite a bit more angry than Fudd, which might surprise you because Fudd is quite angry in Coyote Queen. But she also goes through a real transformation throughout the course of the story. And so the difference is that I didn't go through any sort of emotional healing or transformation until well into my adulthood. So that's probably the biggest difference. But Fudd is one character, even though the story is entirely, for the most part, fictionalized. She really is very similar to me as a child in that I was determined and I was angry and I was wanting to do something about this situation, but also felt very helpless.
Mm-hmm. I appreciated, Jessica, how you brought in the tiptoeing, walking on eggshell elements. that often occurs in domestic violence situations. Can you speak to us about that and what that looks like?
Yeah, I think when people are in situations involving domestic violence, one of the things that they do is there becomes a culture where the abuser is always keeping you off center. So sometimes you are feeling very loved and feeling very happy, and then just as quickly the mood can switch and you will be being controlled or being punished in some way for doing something, and you never quite know when that's going to happen. And so you always end up in this situation where you're kind of on edge, waiting for the hammer to drop and waiting for the next thing. But at the same time, because there's always those really good moments woven in, it's really easy to explain those moments away and think, oh, only if I'm better next time, if only I don't make this person angry, if only this, if only that. And so it's just this web of that perpetuates, where you feel like it becomes impossible to leave at some point. But while you stay, there are moments of great happiness, and then a whole lot of moments where you really know that something bad is going to come down the road.
You wove in really well the psychological elements for a kid, having gone through it myself, and you also, of that back and forth motion of wondering, starting to begin to wonder what is wrong with me or what's really going on. Am I making up these stories? Because it is so all over the place, and one moment really great and one moment really terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something, to be honest, I even still struggle with to this day. And with this book coming out tomorrow, I often have to remind myself, just go back and center myself that no, what happened to you really wasn't okay.
Mm.
And to write a book about domestic violence and abuse, it's very easy for me to say, well, maybe I'm just milking this. Maybe I'm just doing this for publicity. Maybe it wasn't really as bad as I feel like it was. And that's all part of the game. It's part of how the abuser controls you and makes you feel small and makes you feel like you can't go anywhere. So yeah, it's all a very twisted ball of emotions, and something that I really wanted to try to portray as honestly and accurately as I could. So thank you. I'm glad that that stood out for you.
Yeah, absolutely. There were multiple pieces I highlighted of so relatable for me, and such a good message also for other young readers and teens, even adults, to read and be like, oh, that is how it goes. Because I experienced that same thing too.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry that you had to go through that. And I'm really grateful that the book is resonating with you as being really honest depiction of what we went through. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, there are over 600,000 children abused each year in the US, and 10 million people experiencing domestic violence each year in the US. So this is an enormous problem, and it's one that we don't talk about nearly enough. And that's one of the big reasons why I wanted to write this story, and why I'm trying to share my personal experience and just be open and transparent, so that we can start to break down some of these walls of the shame that comes with being a victim and hopefully a survivor.
Mm-hmm. How do you think that kids and teens disassociate in times of tough situations?
Well, I certainly can't speak to all kids and teens, but for myself, the disassociation came most strongly at night, when the fighting would be the most extreme and I would be the most scared. And I developed this remarkable ability to just go into my own head. And it wasn't sleeping, I was awake, but I was able to just clear my head of conscious thought. And I would just repeat a phrase that felt safe over and over to myself. And so I think that type of disassociation, where you sort of just leave your body, is really, really common. And that's what inspired the Coyote transformation in Coyote Queen, because I knew that it would be really boring for the readers if Fudd just laid in bed and repeated, I'm safe. Right. So it had to be something that was interesting. And so I decided that because she lives in rural Wyoming and there are these coyotes howling around her all the time, that could be her safe place and her escape. And so the coyotes really become a metaphor for that longing to escape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was wondering with the coyotes, I'm like, that's very, again, very relatable for
Yeah.
sure. Walk us through your journey, Jessica, of wanting to write the book and getting it from idea, concept, wanting to put it down on paper, to getting it here, of why it did take you the time that it needed to take. to get
Mhm.
here?
Well, I think I first tried to write a memoir right after I graduated university because I had a professor who invited me to write an essay for his handbook. And so that sort of gave me this idea that maybe I was a good writer. And so I decided to get serious about writing a book. And I sat down and wrote the first chapter of what I thought was a memoir, although I had never read a memoir before. And I mailed it off to him, and I never heard back. And so I assumed that my story was not worth telling, and I sort of put it aside for several years. Looking back, of course, the story was worth telling. I was just a really bad writer at that time. And I don't say that to self-deprecate. Like, really, you can't write a memoir that starts out with the date of your birth and where you were born and sort of moves in a biographical way through your life. That's not interesting to readers. And I didn't know that at the time. So it took me a long time to build up the courage to try to tell my story again. So when I sat down to write the memoir in earnest, I spent a lot of time talking to my mom and my siblings and digging up information about my life and trying to piece together what was really a very complicated quilt because of how much we moved and how bad my memory is and how much I've blocked out, which is part of the disassociation. Just trying to sort out in my own mind what my childhood really did look like. And that was a period of tremendous healing for me. But again, it didn't make for a really compelling story because I didn't know it at the time. But books are not about plot. Books are about character development and emotion. And at that time, I hadn't gone through any therapy. I hadn't really begun my healing journey yet. And so I showed it to a girlfriend, and I'll never forget her sitting me down and saying, "This is all really horrifying stuff." And at that point, it was just one bad thing after another, which thankfully I moved away from. But she said, "This is all horrible stuff, but I don't feel anything when I'm reading it." And I
Mm.
remember being just absolutely baffled. Like, how could you read all of these horrible things and not feel anything? And so it wasn't until I started dealing with a therapist and going through my own emotional journey that I started to unpack the emotions associated with what I had been through. And it took me a number of years before I was really able to bring those emotions to the page. And it really wasn't until I got to that point where I decided to fictionalize the story that I think I finally had enough separation that I could put those emotions down on the page in a meaningful way for the reader.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel like when you chose to make it a fiction story that your inner child, the inner child Jessica, was able to find her voice more fully?
In a strange way, that's exactly what happened. Yeah, it really took letting go of trying to tell my own truth. And I think that is partly because I don't have a great memory of all of the different aspects. And so it felt like I was trying to force a story that I couldn't find all the pieces for. And so once I gave Fudd her own story and I could just let her pain and her journey shine through, it felt a lot more real and a lot more emotionally complete to me than when I was trying to tell my own story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you love most about coyotes?
Oh man, they are cool. I really didn't know a lot about coyotes when I first started writing the book. I think it's fascinating how one or two coyotes can make themselves sound like a giant pack. So I remember at one point during my childhood, we lived in this one room cabin that I mentioned. It was right on the border of Wyoming and South Dakota. It was way out in the middle of nowhere. And we had a sort of outhouse that was really nothing more than a plank of wood stretched across two rocks with a hole in the middle of it. And so to go to the bathroom, you'd have to walk across this big open field and go into this rocky area. And I would hear the coyotes howling. And I really believed that our entire cabin was surrounded by coyotes. And I was terrified. So I would never go out and go to the bathroom at night. So now I know that one or two have the ability to make themselves sound like a whole big pack, which I think is really, really cool and hilarious. But okay, the most cool thing about coyotes of all, and a lot of people don't know this, is that they can actually control their reproduction so that when they're in an environment where it's really safe and they have access to a lot of food, they can have several pups in one litter. And when they're in an environment where food is scarce and conditions are really difficult, they can make the choice to have only one or two pups in their litter. And I think that's just absolutely astonishing.
Wow, I never knew that. That
Yeah,
is
yeah,
amazing.
isn't it?
Wow. Okay. So, like the situation of their environment, they're just
Mhm.
able to halt and talk to their body in a way that is needed in that moment.
Yeah.
That is miraculous.
Isn't it cool? Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So, if you were, let's say, going to be a wolf, Jessica, and change, I don't know, like tonight, what kind of a color of wolf, what would you look like or want to look like?
A wolf, huh?
Mhm.
Hmm. Well, I'm going to have to cheat a little bit since my very first book, The Wolf's Curse, was actually about a wolf. I made her white, and I think that would be really cool, even though great white wolves don't really exist. There are Arctic wolves, but I think it would be kind of cool to be a white wolf and just be able to slink through this northern Canadian tundra that I live in, unseen in the snow.
Ooh, camouflage. Yes. What about a coyote?
Oh, well, I love coyotes that just have that biscuity color with the black fringe
Mhm.
on the tips of their fur. So I would probably go with just the standard coyote coloring.
Hmm. Yes. I love that. I think often, so I have rods in my back from
Oh,
scoliosis.
okay.
And so when the weather shifts, it naturally helps me. I don't know why. It may be a disassociation thing for me, but I
Mhm.
always think in that moment that I am transitioning into a wolf, and somehow that makes it feel a little bit better.
Love that. And isn't it amazing how powerful our brains are too? That's really cool. So
Yes.
what wolf are you? Now I'm curious.
I mean, I have always seen myself as just this very beautiful black furred wolf with golden eyes. But I really love the white that you mentioned in the Arctic. That's very beautiful too.
Mhm. Yeah, wolves are really beautiful, beautiful
Mhm.
creatures.
Yes. Did you grow up doing the yard sales?
I did. Most definitely. I remember on Saturday mornings, there was one point where we have had this beat up Willie's Jeep. And so in the summer, the top would be off, and mom and I would collect our quarters. And at that point, I had some young siblings. So we would load them into the back of the Jeep and we would run around to the yard sales just to see what we could find. And I had sort of a love hate relationship with the yard sales because, on one hand, if I got like a quarter, I might be able to add to my stuffed animal collection. But on the other hand, there was this deep seated embarrassment of taking other people's discarded junk that they didn't
Mhm.
want. So, yeah, yard sales were a big part of my childhood. And so I couldn't resist incorporating them into Fud's life as well.
What was one of the most unique finds for you?
I think I would have to go with a pink elephant.
Ooh.
Yeah, I was big on the stuffed animal. So anytime I could find a stuffed animal, I would bring home a stuffed animal.
What did you love about the stuffed animals?
Okay, the thing that I loved the most about the stuffed animals, if I'm being totally honest, is organizing them. That's because when you feel like your life is out of control in so many different areas, having the ability to organize something and feel like you have control over something is really powerful. And so I remember I would have nothing else, but I would own, a small collection of stuffed animals at one point when we lived in a very small house in Wyoming. And I remember just going through and organizing them and reorganizing them and trying to decide how I should organize them. Should it be by color? Should it be by species? Should it be by size?
Mhm. And
Yep.
you had that a sense of control.
Mhm. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. I love that. So was this a weekly thing that you did or just whatever, whenever you were feeling like you needed some sense of control, it would shift for you?
I don't remember how often that I did it. I just have memories of my beloved stuffed animal collection and that it was very important how they were organized.
Mhm.
Mhm.
What do you hope that Coyote Queen will speak to when kids are reading your book? What message would you like them to have?
I think there are really two messages that I wanted to convey. One is directly to young readers who are living in difficult situations, and I want them to see that there is hope if they lean into the power of community and friendship, that there are people available to support them, and if they can just muster the courage to ask for help. And I hope the book provides them a role model for how to do that without being didactic, of course. And then I also wrote this book for the people who aren't living in difficult situations, because I think it's so hard for people to believe that these types of environments exist. And I hope that the book will give them some more empathy, so that if they are in a position where they suspect somebody in their life is in a difficult situation, they're able to understand a little bit better what they're going through and hopefully feel a little bit more comfortable reaching out and offering their help.
Mm-hmm. What would you say to listeners and viewers that maybe haven't experienced this type of situation? What can they look for to help support those around them?
I think it can be as small as a smile. And that's one of the things that I tried to convey in this story. You'll see that when Fudd is acting out, it's not because she's a bad kid. It's because she's dealing with some really tough stuff at home that she can't share or doesn't feel comfortable sharing. And so sometimes when we are in situations where we see somebody behaving in a really awful manner, it's really easy to get mad at them or to judge them, instead of extending some kindness and some gratitude and realizing that they may have things going on behind closed doors. And also, if you're an adult, particularly if you're in a position to let these children know that you are a safe space for them, that if they need to talk, you're there for them. And then, of course, the other thing is, as a child who is often hungry, if you're in a position to send extra snacks with your friend or with your child to school because they have a friend who sits next to them who maybe doesn't always have enough food to eat. I think just those little things can be incredibly powerful and still make a really big difference in a child's life. But the other thing is that if you suspect somebody is in an abusive situation, especially a child, please don't hesitate to pick up the phone and report that situation, because it's really not up to you to decide if it's bad enough for them to need help. Those children probably do need help, and that's up to the professionals to decide. So don't hesitate to call.
Yes, yes. When was the time that you felt the most resilient?
I don't know about the most resilient. I'm conflating resilience and feeling empowered in my own mind, but I ended up leaving home when I was 16. And that was a moment of incredible empowerment for me, that I was finally taking control of my life. There was a lot of fear with it, but there was also this sense there were people around me telling me that this was a big mistake and that really horrible things were going to happen to me. But I just had this deep-seated internal burning flame that told me that I was doing the right thing in protecting myself and building a life for myself. And so that was a really powerful moment for me.
Mm-hmm. We're going to take it to the inner child question segment. Are you ready, Jessica?
Let's do this.
First question: what is your favorite flavor of Blow Pop?
Whoa. Can I say all of them?
Yeah, of course.
I would say maybe sour apple. I mean, sour apple's really good.
It definitely has a punch.
Yeah.
Compared to the rest. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I like it though, Jessica, because I can see you holding the whole bouquet and that's it. Like you're just going to take them all with you.
I'm going to take them all. I'm not picky. If there's some candy or something yummy coming my way, I'm going to take it all.
Second question: what was a friendship that you had as a teen that helped you to be more anchored?
I was very lucky as a teen to have a couple of really good friends, and they each supported me in different ways. we didn't so much talk about what was going on in my home environment, but they were definitely aware of it. And their doors were always open to me so that I could go over and have a meal with them. And I very often would stay the night with them, or even stay sometimes for more extended periods, or use their phone to call my grandmother if there was something that I needed to talk to her about. And I think the other thing that those friends did for me is that they really showed me that there was a different way to be in the world, that not all families were like my family. And so they provided something for me to strive for, because I remember very clearly thinking, this is the kind of life that I want to build for myself. So they were important in the moment, and they were also very aspirational for me.
I love that so much. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because we often don't talk about too that even if you don't have kids or you do have kids, you can be an inspiration and a role model to those around you as well that really do need that love and support and that encouragement too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important.
Mm-hmm. Third question, what is the oddest food combo that you've liked and tried, or you have just tried?
Let's see. I don't know if people will think this is odd or not, but I really like vanilla ice cream with peanut butter.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. It's really tasty. That sweet, salty sort of mix, and also vanilla ice cream with maple syrup is quite yummy.
I haven't done vanilla ice cream with maple syrup.
Ooh, it's worth a try for sure.
Okay, have you done all the above? So vanilla ice cream with peanut butter and maple syrup, Jessica?
I have never done that. It never occurred to me, but now clearly I am going to have to experience that particular kind of magic.
Okay, cheers. I'll try it too, and then we'll talk about these.
That sounds great. I'll never turn down ice cream.
Never. And vanilla, is that your favorite, or what is your favorite ice cream?
My favorite ice cream is praline pecan, and also chocolate chip cookie dough, and also Oreo, also every flavor under the sun, really, except mint chocolate chip. I'm not a mint chocolate.
You said literally you kept going all three of my favorite ice creams back to back. My mouth is watering right now, Jessica.
We'll wrap up and go have some ice cream after this, huh?
Yes, that will be a good celebration for your book tomorrow. Go get all the ice cream.
That's right. There's actually an ice cream shop called The Chocolate Shop in Madison, Wisconsin, where I lived for a number of years, and we still go back regularly to visit friends. And they laugh at us when we go there, because it's literally like every day, okay, we have to go get our chocolate shop fixed. I'm going to get it for another year. They're like, we just had ice cream yesterday. But there's no such thing as too much chocolate.
No. Yeah. No, I'm with you. What would you tell little Jessica today?
I think my message to her would be to continue to believe in herself. At the end of the day, I think it can be really easy when you're in a difficult situation to start doubting yourself, to feel like you're not good enough or that you're not deserving. And so my message to younger Jessica, and to any younger reader, is that they are deserving of all of the good things, and they're deserving of the chance to follow their dreams. And so I hope they don't shortchange themselves and let other people tell them that their dreams are out of reach, because I am living proof that your wildest dreams can come true.
Before we end today, can you share with our listeners and viewers what living a creatively abundant life means to you? Absolutely.
For me, living a creatively abundant life really means focusing on the flow of creativity. And I think it took me 13 years before I got my first book deal, from that time that I really got serious about writing a memoir. And it can be really easy to focus on the external rewards of creation, wanting to get an agent, wanting to get a book deal, wanting to win the awards, wanting to make the lists. Living a creatively abundant life, you really have to sort of block that energy out and focus on the joy of the creation And for me, that's really where I try to keep my eye. It's not always easy, but that's when I find the most enjoyment from my life, is when I really can just focus on the writing.
Mm-hmm. We're going to blow out a birthday candle for Jessica. Her book is coming out tomorrow, Coyote Queen. So on the count of 3, we're going to all blow out the candle together. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, that was so fun. Thank you.
Where can our listeners and viewers find Coyote Queen or connect with you if they have any questions?
Absolutely. So Coyote Queen, again, comes out tomorrow. It is available anywhere that books are sold. And listeners and viewers can find me online at jessicavitalis.com. And then I'm also over on Instagram at jessicavauthor, and I would love to connect.
We'll put those in the comments below so you can have easy access to connect to Jessica. Thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you, everyone who have joined us live and will join on the replay. Remember, as you go about the rest of your week, to find the things that are working in your life. You are the creator of your own story. What steps will you take next? Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jessica.